Hey, welcome to Scale by Design. David, thank you for joining us today. Everybody out there, we're joined right now by David Neff. I'm really excited to speak with you today, David.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to
Today, talking about how to break into venture capital and what that experience is like, and to get David's take on starting a career in venture capital. So David, I know that that's going to be incredibly valuable. And again, like we haven't discussed that before, so I know that's going to be
cool.
really interesting to our audience tuning in. But before we do all that, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your background and how you kind of came about getting it? It's all very relevant to the topic too. So your
Sure.
background, what you're doing now, and how you kind of came about getting into venture capital. Just, a little bit of a context would be great as we're jumping into this.
Yeah, no, happy to do it. And,
Cool.
my background is about 21 years and thinking about customer experiences. And, really working one-on-one to help people, right? Whether that's people, process, technology, culture, or strategy. And so in my career, I've done a lot of work in e-commerce, a lot of work in actually building and launching digital products. And then kind of the second half of my career was at some agencies that got acquired. So a lot of agency and management consulting experience. And not just in, hey, we're going to go build your website, but in, hey, your team's not operating right. What is going on around people, process, technology, and culture to actually make your team work better? And you can imagine that's across a wide variety of big companies. And then I've had the fortune to work in some startups. And my path to VC was really about taking that product, taking that strategy, taking that how teams actually work and operate. And, what does that look like at a venture capital firm? When a venture capital firm wants to do more than write a check and show up at a board meeting, right? That kind of new wave of venture capital, let's say in the last 10 years, that is like, you know what, we're actually going to lean in. We want to go in, and if you need a workshop on helping figure out who the perfect customer is for this thing building, we want to be a part of that. And in fact, one of our partners can actually help you with that. So you and I know that's a little rare, and maybe a lot of people say that, but there's not a lot of people who are actually doing that work versus that kind of mentality of, financials, write a check, show up for a board meeting.
Sure. Yeah. And I think you're right. There's probably a lot of companies that claim to do that. I think, a lot of them try. I think one issue too, just like with the operator platform model, is that sometimes the operators that they have are people that maybe have been out of it for quite a while. And so it's like maybe folks that were in an operator seat 15, 20 years ago, or maybe less, but things are changing so quickly, particularly in highly innovative fields like deep tech or biotech or climate tech. And so it's having a pulse and having been involved in an operator seat recently is, I think, becoming more and more important in these like fast growing sectors. So I think that's a really interesting topic. And yeah, it's really cool to just get a sense of like how you've been able to leverage your experience to get into venture capital. And you've been now with what's the name of the VC you're with? Sorry. It was
Ecliptic Capital.
Ecliptic. And so you've been with them now for like around 4 months, right?
That's right. Brand spanking new.
Hell yeah. Yeah. So it's getting back to recency of experience, what I was just referring to. I think that, it's going to be really interesting to talk through like how people can break into VC. So could you walk us through how you went about it and what were some of let's just go through that kind of life cycle, if you will. Like when you started out, what did you do and what problems did you start to see, like as you were, I suppose, seeking for your first opportunity within the industry?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been a two-time founder, and then I was at an agency that got bought by PricewaterhouseCoopers to go into their digital business. And then I was on the leadership team of another agency that got bought by Accenture, right? And I think, my main thing coming out of 10 years in consulting was like, I don't want to do consulting anymore at all, ever. I, I'm tired of WBS codes. I'm tired of traveling. I'm tired of billing, in 30-minute increments to particular clients, or not having the right codes to do it. And so I just started to probably think maybe 2 years ago of like, what did I want to do? What's something that's super interesting to me with my background that leverages a lot of my skills? Is it e-commerce? Okay, well, e-commerce is super interesting. I have a good background in that, but does that leverage all my skills? Is it product? Again, same thing, but does product leverage my strategy skills, or, working with teams and running workshops and helping them understand things? And, I started to just talk to a lot of people, which I think is the genesis of a lot of good job searches. It's just, hi, hello, I'm thinking about this. What do you do for a living? Again, remind me, how does it work? What's interesting to you? What do you hate about it? And I had conversation after conversation after conversation.
Quick follow-up question on that before we move on, if that's cool. I wanted
Yeah.
to, I mean, the VC community is pretty tight and community based, right? Like
Yes.
it can be difficult to open the door to a lot of those conversations. At least in my experience, it's typically kind of a refer in network. How were you able to generate those conversations?
It's obtuse is the way I put it, right? There's all these networks that are kind of behind the scenes. And there's definitely people out there advertising, come say hello to me, right? I'm into it, right? I think of Hustle Fund out of San Francisco. I think of Elizabeth, Eric, Brian Nichols over there, that are just like the friendliest, nicest VCs, who are growing like an angel network, but also growing into and doing really interesting VC work, right? And so people like that were super open. And again, Twitter, I know it's a bit of a hot mess right now, but when I was thinking about this a year and a half ago, you could tweet and meet and talk to a lot of VCs who would then refer me to somebody else and have a conversation. And I also know that I'm privileged and blessed to have a good network, and be able to talk to people. And Ecliptic Capital, I actually talked to some of the partners there before they even had the idea of Ecliptic Capital, right? They're like,
That's cool.
we're doing angel investing. It's interesting. We're trying to get more organized. And I was like, well, how can I help you get more organized? How do we stay in touch and keep talking? So, if you are looking on LinkedIn for a job in VC right now, it's hard and it's obtuse. Well, what does a venture partner mean versus a partner, versus, hey, we're looking for an entrepreneur in residence, versus, hey, we're looking for a venture fellow? And like, what does that actually mean, right? It's very different than a lot of people listening who are like, look, I'm a manager, and then I'm a senior manager, and then I'm a director, and then I'm a vice president at XYZ job, right? So I feel not only is it obtuse to find and break in, it's obtuse even to like do a search on LinkedIn and what do these jobs actually mean and what are they?
Sure. And so that's, I think what we were, during our prep for this episode was going into just how difficult it is to get that information. Did you end up finding any resources, or was it primarily just conversationally based that you were able to learn more about the industry?
I did. It's interesting because there's a lot of books that I'm happy to share with folks and drop in the links. And I'm a big, reader.
Cool.
So I'm happy to kind of follow up with some of those too. And then
That'd be great. We could put it in the description of the episode if people want to check out. That would be really helpful. Yeah.
There's a guy named John who runs Going VC. And Going VC offers a lot of super interesting resources online about how to break into VC. Inside.com, actually their YouTube channel has something they call reverse pitch. And so I sat there, and I watched 12 reverse pitches of VC showing up and like pitching, 200 startups that were tuning into a live stream or in an audience somewhere. And number one, I'd never heard of a reverse pitch, so that was cool to see. And then number two, I was like, I'm actually learning what all these different people do. And then, I think the last thing I mentioned, Hustle Fund, but Hustle Fund has an angel squad that you join. and they basically go through a bunch of classes and teach you how to be an angel investor. And so like leveling up from angel investor to venture capitalist is a super interesting path as well. And I feel I learned so
Yeah.
much from those angel classes about what actually happens inside of venture.
Where did you, and so that's good. Sorry for jumping around a little bit. I just want to make sure I got it. Where
No,
did you
no,
say
all
you,
good.
where did you hear the reverse pitches?
Inside.com, their
Inside.com.
YouTube channel, which is interesting.
Okay.
You know, YouTube
Nice.
can teach you how to like fix your broken sink, but also give you like a window into venture capital.
Right. Right. That's really cool. Nice. And so what's it like? I mean, I think you're right. Like you're seeing more like operator led funds or platform services or operators coming in more so as LPs, for instance. Like I just had
Yeah.
Scott Barker on the podcast. The episode hasn't published yet, but he's a founding partner at GTM Fund. And the whole concept behind GTM Fund is it's this operator community led fund where they have a ton of LPs. I think well over like 100 at this
Wow.
point in time, and they're all like specialists within different parts of tech. So a lot of them are like go-to-market leaders.
Yeah.
That could be, just in all different kind of flavors in tech, and they're currently operators. And so it's a really big, network in terms of expertise, in terms of business development opportunities, partnerships, and as
Yeah.
well as it's actually bringing in like 70% of deal flow is
Yeah.
through these like vetted relationships that the LPs have. So it's a pretty cool model. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on, like, it seems to be becoming more popular. It's kind of cool that, you have that operator background. How has that been opposed to coming from like just, down the pipe, like finance background or, what has been your experience with your background coming into the industry, and, how do you leverage your skill set to be an effective VC?
Yeah. No, it's a great question, right? And I feel healthy tension is like the two words that come up, right? Because you don't want to have a fund without really smart, intelligence, well put together finance people, right? And the smart, intelligent, put together finance people are also wanting the deal flow, the ability to dive deep on customer or go to market or sales, or, like, let's actually think of through the customer experience, or hey, there's a particular tool or technology that I used as an operator. And so those two things have to come together really, really well for a fund to work. I think there's a lot of solo GPs, and that's obviously a rising trend. And you see that in micro funds of like 15 million or 20 million. And more power to them. I think that's amazing. And if you can raise the funds, go to it. But I'm wondering, like, man, are they outsourcing their finance? And if so, to who? Or are they finance people who are outsourcing the operations? If, who is that, right? Like you mentioned that the GTM fund, and that's amazing to have like all of these go-to-market folks kind of at the beck and call of interesting startups and bringing in business. But there has to be that healthy tension. There has to be that idea of the venture capitalist who is like, I love this entrepreneur. There's a vision here. There's a product here. She has an amazing background. She has a diverse team. It's great. But like, we have to see traction, right? We have to see revenue. They have to report that revenue. They have to send the invoices. They have to bill. They have to close the contracts. They have to have all these muscles around them. And it's like, how much does the VC get involved in that? So not only is a healthy tension between maybe, these Wall Street finance folks and the operators, right? Which I think is great, but also in VC as a whole with the startups, and what's the healthy tension there? Because it can't just be, let's just keep writing you checks, right? I think
Right.
we all saw how that happened at WeWork famously, and Theranos, and lots of other places as well. So that healthy tension is needed in kind of all aspects of those relationships.
Yeah, those are a couple actually very, very good examples. And I think it's great. I think it's I coming from an operator background gives you a lot of advantage when it comes to, I think, doing the diligence process, as well as empowering your portfolio to succeed, particularly if you are operating in a similar industry as well. That can leverage not only just down the pipe business expertise, but everything from business development to partnerships, which I find to be a really important angle. And particularly the more technical of a space you get into, like, climate tech, biotech, deep tech, whatever, these highly technical, scientific based startups, the more that you have some operators that come from that background, I feel like it becomes increasingly important. Because if you're like a generalist VC, or come from just a purely finance background, and you're trying to break into biotech, like I just don't even know if that's like possible to do effectively without understanding the science and the sector deeply. I'm sure like there's some brilliant people out there, and I'm not saying it hasn't been done, but
Sure.
typically like the when you get into that space, you see folks that have a pretty rich background and network within those sectors. So, and I think it's a good transition to get into. It seems like your fund is tell me if I'm wrong. Is there a focus on climate tech, or
Yeah.
how much
Yeah.
of the portfolio is focused around that?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I feel we've been able to very narrow our thesis over time. And, that's part of being a startup venture capital group on Fund One, is coming out of the gate and narrowing thesis and thinking a lot about it, right? So we're investing in security identity. We're investing in life sciences. So we've got med tech. We're investing in deep tech, which is kind of where climate fits in, and some of our material sciences companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, for us, climate is up and coming, right? So we have two really solid, 2 to 3 really solid investments that are material science and also climate. And those things often interplay with each other. And it's interesting, to your earlier point, I want people listening to this to also know that, if you're looking for a job in climate, what does climate tech, climate change need right now? They have the people who have 20 years of climate science or a PhD. What they don't have is that really smart developer who just got laid off from Twitter, right? Or, the person who just got cut in the restructuring of insert tech giant here in the last 2 months, that does biz dev or marketing, or can, execute on go to market. They don't have those people. And so there's a great resource called Terra.do. And I was a climate fellow at Terra.do and loved my time there. And to your point, it helped me get smart on the science. But they published a big article about like, welcome, right? Like you don't need a PhD from the University of Hawaii on climate to come work in this industry, right? Like, please, we would love really smart front-end developers from HubSpot, right? Or DevOps people who are getting out of Twitter. And so I want people to hear that and to know that. And also for those VCs out there who are putting money into that space, to know that, like, you may not have 20 years of climate tech experience, but you could still be a really good person who's willing to learn and put the work in behind the scenes in a particular sector that you're interested in.
I love it. And I want to dial in even more to climate tech, and
Sure.
why it's so interesting to your fund, and specifically like what types of solutions are you focused on within climate tech? Like, is there any, like, you feel like underserved type of solution out there, or just like where's the biggest opportunity to invest in such a way that it's achievable to actually get a return within a reasonable amount of time,
Yes.
and has like the biggest, I suppose, potential over the next 10 years? What are you guys most excited about?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think, at Ecliptic Capital, we think a lot about patient capital, right? Patient capital solving capital P problems, right? So things that actually affect people on this earth, not NFTs or scooters or things like that. And nothing wrong with that, right? If
what do you have
out
against
there
scooters?
building, nothing, right? I mean, electrify everything. I'm all for it, right?
And if you're scooter people are going to come after you.
Please,
They're going to come after you, man.
Send the emails to James at Secure. And so for me, I feel like what we're trying to do is think about a couple things. Where have we put our money so far? We put our money in Veloce Energy, which is building kind of what the future of EV charging looks like, right? How do we take less power from the grid to actually speed up permitting? How do we not dig deep trenches in the ground to actually speed up permitting? Do innovative hardware and innovative software to really figure out the best way of when, how, and where to actually charge your EV. And then how do you package that all up? How do you make that scalable? And they've got some tremendous traction, a fantastic company out there, Veloce Energy. Another one is Navico. Navico has really thought of this interesting clay-based microparticle that gets applied directly to fruit. So instead of you and I we buy pears. Pears are in this huge, wasteful plastic hard shell, right? How do you, and why are they there? Because they rot, right? And those greenhouse gases from fruits and agriculture rotting in stores or in our houses, or they get thrown in a dumpster, is not a huge part of total emissions, but is a large part of emissions, right? And so how do we think about what's the better version of that? And so this is actually like a spray-on material that goes directly onto the fruit to help it stay shelf stable for longer periods of time, right? So that's energy transition, energy, and that's like material science applied directly to fruit, right? And I think the other thing we're super interested in is buildings, right? How do we decarbonize existing buildings? How do we decarbonize concrete that goes in it, right? Buildings and building construction sectors are responsible for 30% of global final energy consumption and 27% of total energy sector emissions. So you can imagine, what are we not doing? We're not building less buildings, unfortunately, right? We may be figuring out how to build them better, how to decarbonize them, right? How to take old buildings and take out, burning oil, right? Or take out gas, or take out other things that are bad for the environment. And so let's say we want to make this entire building run on electricity. What does that look like? How do we do that? What are the startups out there that are kind of figuring out that? And, in 2021, like direct and indirect emissions from building operation actually went higher, right? Like we had this lower bump during COVID, and now it's gaining again, right? In fact, it was like 2% higher than 2019 and 5% higher than 2020. So you can imagine all these buildings are being built in kind of still the old way, right? And, how do we think about building it from the ground up to take the carbon out, to measure how much carbon's coming out of these buildings, things like that. So I see us putting our money into kind of those areas, right? Energy transition, material science that has to do with preventing climate, and then, a lot around construction and buildings and, the software and the hardware that decarbonizes those buildings.
What do you think specific? So that's all very interesting, and just dialing into the construction aspect, just from a very just for those folks out there that really aren't familiar at all with the space. So we don't have to get deeply technical unless you want to, but
sure.
Like within construction, like what do you mean, like more so like how you construct the building, or like directly to the construction industry? Like what other types of solutions are we when we say construction, what are the potential applications? All of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, right? I think there's actual material science on the decarbonization. Like, what is a better version of concrete that's used all across the world today? And what you see is kind of early forays into 3D printing buildings and 3D printing homes. And what are those materials, though, right? And is that actually putting less carbon into our environment? Right? It all depends on the actual material that's being used and the 3D printers and things like that, right? And then you have like, could we actually use different types of wood, right? Could we actually use, different chemical combinations, different types of wood that could be almost as strong as concrete? And, over time, also just life cycle. I mean, I think of it as a timeline, James, right? Like, what can we do before you build it? what is the software that's monitoring what's going on with that building around electric, or man, let's put heat pumps in, because heat pumps are actually proving to be one of the best uses for that decarbonization of buildings, right?
Yeah.
Heat pumps giving, cooling and heating, not the best name for the technology, but that's what it is, right? And then what happens at the end of life of that building, right? Can we recycle it? Does it get torn down? Does it get renewed? And the end part of it is very fuzzy to me, right?
Right.
I'm sure there's really brilliant people in that working at kind of like the end of life of buildings. I don't know much about that, and I'll throw up my hands and say that, but that's something I'm also super curious about. We've been thinking a lot about the materials, and then what's going on with the building currently, right? What
Yeah.
software, what hardware are you using to monitor it?
Right. I think that there's probably a huge opportunity in source materials and just like the whole supply chain aspect too. Like
That's
that
right.
whole part,
That's
there
right.
seems like there's so much room for innovation as it's correlated to climate tech, and you're right, like how the buildings are operating. I mean, so is this something, okay, 2023 focus that you all are looking into, or have you made any initial investments in the construction
Yeah.
building
No,
space?
I think we're super into it. We're researching, we're reaching out to a whole bunch of different folks. I think like any VC firm, we're also opportunistic, right? If
Mhm.
someone listens to this and is like, I have a fantastic idea around geothermal energy, let's have a chat, let's talk, let's be educated, right? Know that is probably not the red hot burning issue with us at the current time, but we want to hear about it, we want to have a conversation. And that's part of, James, that's part of the allure, and also the trap of climate and climate tech is you could go everywhere all the time into anything, right? Are
Right.
you sinking kelp in the ocean with robotic boats? Or are you working on a better solar panel that could actually have a better angle? Or are you working on solar panels that go over your windows? And how far apart are those two things? So I think that's part of it, is narrowing the thesis and concentrating and really becoming that expert in maybe one or two verticals.
Right. And I think that's it. It's like when you look at the specialty of climate tech or biotech,
Yeah.
it's like there's just so much to unpack. And it's like when I've spoken with a few partners at biotech, climate tech, VCs, and they all have
Yeah.
drastically different focuses. And it's almost
Right.
like holy shit. Like it's not even
Yeah.
like climate tech as a sector, right? It's like, it's just there's just so many applications that it's almost not specific enough to get a pulse on what the VC's expertise is, right? There's just
Yeah.
so much. It's
Yeah, it
incredible.
is. And again, again, that's the trap, but also
Uh-huh.
the fun of it,
Oh
because
yeah.
what you don't want to do is be spread across all of that like peanut butter,
I don't think so.
right?
I mean, I think like,
Like
yeah.
like what's your major and what's your minor? And I think about that in my kind of new VC career a lot, and would encourage other VCs who are new to think about that too. What's your major? What's your minor? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was speaking with a managing partner the other day who, you know, her background was in as pharmacy and just like pharma in general, drug development. And so she's
Yeah.
looking for products that are leveraging biotech to create better personalized care and solutions for everything from Alzheimer's to cancer, and finding innovative
Yeah.
ways to leverage technology to accelerate the testing process and drug development process, and FDA getting to the point where it can, drugs can get FDA approval, and getting it to market to help people faster. So, I mean, that's
Yeah.
one application of like biotech. And then I could, the next day talk
Right.
to somebody that's again like, hey, how do we like how do we like get rid of CO2 emissions when it comes to producing, meat, right? Or whatever,
Yeah.
it's like, it's just like such a
Exactly.
different, different application. But and that's what,
Yeah.
yeah, as you said, it like it makes it so fascinating is like as I'm having more of these conversations, I'm learning so much, right? And
Yeah,
there's a lot of brilliant people in the space too. It's like you see a lot of like scientists that are becoming like venture capitalists, right?
that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
And so many scientists that we interact with that have become brilliant entrepreneurs, right? And
yeah,
I love that. Like, what is our job at the end of the day, right? Our job is to help. Our job is to assist. Our job is to invest. And then our job is to disappear, right? Like I want that person going out and winning Forbes top 50 innovative people on the planet, and like you're not going to mention us in your acceptance speech,
unless they want to.
and that's okay. Maybe, but but I'm like, I'm okay with that, right? Like we've helped, we've leveraged our connections, we've gone in and ran a workshop with you. We introduced you to some great software that we think really will help your business, and now you're out there being successful. And again, I think a lot about VC versus private equity, right? I've had a lot of friends who have conversations around VC versus private equity. And, in my mind, it's like, great, VC has a light hand on the wheel, or a VC is in the seat next to you. And a good VC is like, hey, James, take a left up here, because when I took a right, it sucked. And these other 6 companies I helped, that right up there is off a cliff, my friend. Where private equity just grabs the wheel and says, you know what, listen to us, we're taking a left, right?
Mhm.
And I simplify to make the point of the difference there, right? And I think that's what I'm really enjoying in that VC world, is being able to lean in and help as much as the entrepreneur wants that help.
Yeah, no, that's I love that. I love that. It sounds like you're really enjoying the transition thus far, and you're having a
Yeah,
lot of fun. Yeah.
it is, and it's interesting to like wake up and be like, oh, I want to go to work today. I'm really interested to go to work, right? Because I think a lot of us get up and we just go to work.
Hmm.
And some of us get up and we dread going to work, right?
Right.
And I was almost never in the dread go to work, although we all have those days, but I was definitely into like, this is what I do. Let's go do it. And now I'm
Mhm.
like, this is what we do.
Hell yeah.
You know what? I have these 6 emails. I have these 4 people I need to follow up with. There's this piece of software I think would be great. Let me go figure that out and bring it
Yeah.
back, right? And it's just different, which is
Yeah.
really cool.
I think so. And I mean, I also think where you all are focused on within climate tech is probably the most exciting sector to be focused on right now. So if I
Yeah.
were to, I mean, I'm running my own company, so
Yeah.
limited time. But I would say that probably I'd want, if I got involved more so with venture capital beyond hosting the show, it would be to find an LP role at a VC that specializes in climate tech, because I just find the whole uh, topic and different applications, a variety of applications, just fascinating. So I'm really happy for
Yeah.
you. And I
Thank you.
appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights with us. We're about to come up on time here. So I just wanted to make sure that we could, if people want to engage with you or Ecliptic Capital, what's the best way to do so? Where can they find you?
Yeah. No, happy to do it. I'm at Dave I am on everyone's favorite troubled social network, Twitter. I'm at Dave I am on Mastodon as well, if you're into that. And then I'm David at eclipticcapital.com. If folks want to email me directly, and obviously I'm on LinkedIn and publishing and writing a ton on Medium as well.
Love it, love it. And well, thank you, David. I appreciate you coming on today and spending some time with me. This has been a lot of fun.
No, definitely. Very much a lot of fun, and I appreciate it. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, for everybody tuning in, thank you for joining us on Scale by Design. If you're enjoying the content, we would really appreciate if you could leave us a review on whatever streaming platform that you're using, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also, feel free to check out our website. It's scalebydesign.io. You can find other shows. You can see the show transcripts, and you can also apply to be a guest on the show. So anyways, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time. Take care.